Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Yes.
Trustee Cates,
Here.
Trustee Loring.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. Just to do some level setting for today, we have nothing that is due to us today from the plan timeline perspective. We have a lot of deadlines coming up. And so the overall theme of this meeting, I would say, is update and progress report. Today we're going to look at how we've continued to spread the word and engage people related to the strategic plan. We're going to talk about some updated implementation timelines, which will help inform our work over the next year and beyond. Get an update on what's been happening at the campus level, which we know is a big part of the deadlines that are coming up, and then talk about the work we have in the fall. I think that is the goal of this meeting, is just update and progress report, because again, there are no deadlines that have come and are right now. Are there any questions about the agenda before we kick off? Great. And as a result, the materials are a little thin, which I appreciate. Today's more of about a discussion. I'm confident we will make up for that in volume in future meetings. So with that, let's kick it off. Chancellor, unless there's anything you want to start with today.
No, just by way of explanation, we are working very hard on implementation. We have weekly meetings. Much of our president or our chancellor's council meetings are devoted to implementation. And I can assure you that this particular document is probably being treated more seriously than any other such document that's been produced at a college or university level in our system. And I think every one of our vice chancellors and presidents could report favorably on the steps that they're taking. This is an overriding document. It is an incentive for us to move together, and we are doing just that.
That's great. And I will say, and at our next meeting in October, we will hear directly from from the campuses about their progress related to the goals. So that's great to know. And thank you very much. So with that, let's kick it off with the conversation about distribution and socialization. For this today, I believe we are going to hear from Jeff St. John as well as Jen O'Leary. And Jen, we should say congratulations to Jen, who I think since the last meeting got married since our last meeting. Congratulations.
I did. Thank you.
Yes.
Trustee Kane, thank you. Yeah, I'll be sharing two relatively quick updates on this.
Hey, Jeff, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
Since we recognized a wedding, we should recognize that Lee Softly is now a grandmother.
Oh, congratulations.
And that happened just in the last week. So we can't celebrate one thing without anyone have a birthday.
Celebrate all the things. I mean,
right.
I think it's key to strategic. It's both strategic and worth planning to do celebrations. So congratulations. If anyone else has congratulations they would like to share, let's do it.
I would just add that clearly Jen is in love and has the wedding. I had just no idea how gobsmacked I would be by a grandchild. So I'm a little wacky, but I am very happy. Thank you, Chancellor.
That's outstanding.
It's pretty scary, Lee. Pretty scary.
Jeff, let's take it back to you. Go for it.
So I have to follow that. That's just great. Thank you very much,
luck.
Chancellor and Trustee Kane. I'll do my best to recover here. So two quick updates for me, primarily about socialization. So as the trustees know, initial distribution of the plan occurred widely and furiously in mid-June when we released it to the UMS community, to boards of visitors members, and many others. Some physically, some electronically, and many external stakeholders by directing them to our strategic planning website, which Kim Jenkins and her team are managing so ably for us right now. On the socialization side, this continues and will, it's continued, as the Chancellor alluded, very seriously over the summer, but will also ramp up in the fall, particularly as faculty come back to campuses and begin to be recruited to serve on implementation working groups in one of the many areas where we have work going forward through the fall and into next spring, and of course, well beyond that. So in addition to the chancellor's visits to campuses this fall semester, the work that the vice chancellors and the presidents do in their communities, both campus and external communities, even in my work with the Faculty Governance Council and in meetings I'll have with each Senate and Assembly this fall semester in person across the system. The primary focus, along with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, will be strategic plan implementation, how faculty can get involved, why they should get involved, the importance of this, and the opportunity that, as the chancellor also noted, that this represents for us. So recruitment of faculty, of professional staff, classified staff, academic leaders, other administrators onto these teams will be part and parcel of weaving the plan into the daily thinking and consciousness of everyone throughout our system, so that as people are considering the work they're doing, just as trustees heard yesterday during the great FFT meeting we had, what's the tie to strategic planning will be the question that is foremost in mind for each of the things that we do in the coming years. And I think with that, as an overview of socialization, you'll hear more in detail about recruitment in a few minutes. But with that, I want to turn it over to Jen to talk about 2 key updates that she has to share.
Yeah, so as Jeff mentioned, kind of the internal and external efforts are underway. One piece we've been asked specifically to overlay the Humane System Strategic Plan with the State of Maine Economic Development Strategy. This is just an example of a strategic partnership that, will help both efforts underway as we look at raising awareness and relevance. And as they have successes and we have successes, it kind of provides that cross collaboration and promotion that way. So excited
Can
about
you say more about that? Because I think that's a big deal, because that wasn't long planned. That came about because we launched the strategic plan. Can you say a little bit more about that connection, that collaboration, that meeting, and how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So, I think there's been past kind of existing work and partnerships. I know Vice Chancellor Free Monday sits on kind of the planning board, Renee Kelly. There's other key groups and even work with Rosa on the workforce board. This specific conversation was really making them aware kind of, we are launching this exciting initiative with a strategic plan for the University of Maine system. And then I think as they're looking right now at a progress report, and there's different listening sessions and opportunities to really partner on those aspects, want us to kind of go through and partner with overlaying our timeline and goals to that. So they met with their implementation director, and again, just as we're both working on implementation at the same time, just kind of provides that. I think to your point, it's an exciting opportunity tied to the plan. So I think, again, it's looking at these broad-based initiatives. So if we're looking at successes, different ways to solve problems, hit goals, all that, it provides this opportunity to do that. So
Jen, I just want to jump in with one other additional detail. Something that came up in the meeting was, as Jen said, they're looking at a progress report. They're moving towards 50% of their timeline. So they wanted to have a good update. And when we were talking with folks from the state, there are a lot of things that we do that in part because of funding that they've provided or additional, they've given us adult degree completion funds, and it's been very helpful to be able to kick off initiatives. So in reality, those are also their wins. It's something we're doing and it's helping our enrollments, but it's their funding. So it's a win on their side as well. And I think it's really nice to be able to align those and talk more about that so that we can see that partnership there. Sorry, Jen.
Nope, that's fine. And then I think just another quick piece, we're currently working on a draft kind of communication framework. It's a document kind of filling in key contacts and leads of existing either strategic plan groups and some of the efforts that Jeff had mentioned and that you'll hear about coming up, but looking at that. And with all those initiatives too, really partnering with Tori Ryden for that kind of the news and media aspect once those aspects are ready. But so there'll be more coming on that. But I think, again, that will be a really good overview document. So it kind of connects all the existing pieces in a way that everyone can kind of see and make sense of it. So anything else, Jeff and Carolyn, to add to that?
I'll only say, Jen, that the trustees will be pleased when they see the level of detail in the communication plan. It's a significant amount of work by you, primarily. It gives us a very clear path forward to share information and share opportunity with internal and external constituents, and really do that in a way that also aligns with the external affairs work that Tori does very nicely. So look forward to that stage when we're here with the trustees, showing them that work.
That's great. Yeah, Barbara, go ahead.
I would imagine that the external communication efforts that you just described, in particular with economic development, would certainly emphasize the opportunities, the focus, the potential for our partnership in the state of Maine's growth and development. So that's all, that's great. I'm wondering if internally you have weaved in the hard choices part of what this plan is going to require, and the need for all the internal stakeholders, the faculty, the staff, the system office, and everybody to work together to make hard choices, and that the plan is a guide that would allow us to debate those hard choices and make some decisions. But obviously, there will be times when this plan is relied upon to make some hard choices that some people are not going to be happy about. And being upfront and fairly blunt about that aspect of what the coming year or two will require is what I'm asking, is your office doing in some way to help set the stage for our decision making?
I'm happy to jump in, Jeff. I don't know if you were going to answer, but from my perspective, at least I can say I'm going to report in just a little bit about sort of the progress from the university level. I think that in part that starts with the conversations that the presidents are having with their campuses. Again, they've been on off contract. The faculty haven't been there, but they're coming back, and a lot of them, as President Rice mentioned a few minutes ago, they're sort of welcome back in their meetings and their workshops. So the strategic plan has been identified as a topic on almost all of those conversations. And they're beginning to have those types of conversations with them. As the chancellor and I are looking toward his fall visits and planning what we're going to do at the campuses, I've also listed that as a conversation that we need to talk to maybe specifically faculty assemblies, very specific groups about some of the areas that the decisions that might need to be made at their universities or within their departments, and just talking to them about from a system perspective what that would look like. So those conversations are planned, more so happening in the future, simply because it's difficult to get a group together in August when people are at varying states of being on the campus, but definitely happening.
Right. And I would think the Board of Visitors would be very important to hear that message as well, because they're the rah-rah, and they're the folks on the outside looking in who have all these emotional connections to the programs and people in their local university system. They think about it as a community resource, obviously, and for them to help understand the hard choices that we're going to have to be making here over the next couple years would be just as important from my perspective, that they hear that, as well as, of course, the opportunities for the system as a whole.
That's excellent. Yeah, sorry, excellent point. And then Kimberly Jenkins, I'll just give her a quick shout out. She's working right now with sort of restructuring how we meet with and when, and the communication flow with the Board of Visitors. So that's an excellent, I saw her writing, so I know she's put that on the list as well. Sorry, Emily.
I'm going to go to the chancellor and then Roger to you. I was going to say, Barbara, I think that's an amazing point about the Board of Visitors, and I'm writing it down as well to talk to Trish, because I know we do at least 1 or 2 a year joint conversations with them as Board of Trustees and Board of Visitors, and it would be good to center this in that. So thank you. I'm making that note as well. Chancellor, did you want to add to this conversation before I go to Roger?
Yes, if I might. What I think is important, Barbara, I agree that what you're saying is absolutely important. On the other hand, it's also important that the document not be seen as a cudgel that is going to be used to beat people over the head. Because if you want to make sure that the faculty doesn't buy into this, then we have to walk that very fine line for a period of time, because this happened in May, because faculty was off a contract, we have some catching up to do. That's not to say that we've wasted a single day since its adoption, but it's a fine line. And so I think Carolyn's reference to the fall visits is an important one. But I also want to go a step further and say that our presidents are working as a team, unlike has been seen before in this system. And our presidents are, in fact, sharing the difficult choices that need to be made. And I believe that they are the better messenger for hometown problems, to put it in context. Each of the presidents who's here has delivered that message. Joe McDonald's letters to faculty on an ongoing basis are nothing short of masterful. I know Joan does it. I know Raymond, who had to go from 3 deans to 1 dean in a matter of months, has referenced the need for change as documented in this new plan that we have. So I can assure you that's being done, but not in a cudgel kind of way. We're not going to beat people over the head. What we are doing is introducing reality on a mass basis, and that's not an easy thing to do. And so it has to be a step-by-step process. But I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, Barbara, as we have challenges. I will say one other thing, and that is that we have universities that are in relatively strong positions, and we have universities that are in relatively difficult, much more difficult situations. And it's important that faculties at one place not be overtaken by the message delivered at another place. And so making sure that this is driven on a campus by a university basis is actually part of the strategy.
Well, I would like to respond just 1 minute, please. Can I do
Yep.
that?
Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't use the word cudgel, and I really don't enjoy being characterized in that manner. That's number one. Number two, this is a system plan with system problems. And if some campuses are doing great, of course, that's wonderful. But we will be solving some of these problems with resources under our purview on a system-wide basis. So I appreciate the nuance of the messages that the system office is giving. I just wanted to emphasize the need, and hopefully my understanding is now that you are emphasizing that the system has some issues. The system is going to work together as a system to solve them, and individual campuses need to understand they are part of this system and may need to make some hard choices. That's my only concern. And I think we're on the same page. Thank you.
You know, I think we are, and if I offended you, that was not my intention. And I was not implying that you wanted it to be used as a cudgel, but I can tell you from our collective experience of presidents and vice chancellors that's where people go very quickly. And so I was not saying you intended it to be a cudgel, but I am saying that's how faculty in many cases would interpret that form of delivery. So it's nuanced. I think that's a better way for me to have said it. So I apologize to you, Barbara.
Thank you both. And I'm going to transition to Roger. And I will say, I think, and Barbara and I both know this very well because we were on the writing committee. In the writing of the plan, I think we tried very hard to balance the reality and the hard choices with the aspirations and the opportunities. And I think that that balance that we were able to strike in the writing of the plan, I think hopefully there's some good material there to build on to have that balanced conversation in the communications going forward. The words are there. Roger, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, that was just a great discussion, and I'm glad that I was able to watch it. So thank you. I just wanted to circle back very briefly to something Jen said, and that is the external communication of this plan. I don't think there, and I wish that Tori were here for this discussion, but I don't remember seeing anything in the press or on the news about the fact that about this very important thing that is happening, that is the issuance of the strategic plan, that not the details, which will make people's eyes glaze over, but the fact that we are thinking longer term, we're thinking strategically, where we realize we've got not only opportunities and aspirations, but also challenges we're facing, and we're facing them head on. And I don't know what the theory is about why we are not already out there with the news of this plan and presenting it in a positive way. But I think we should be sooner rather than later. And
Roger, I'll jump in first and say we did put it out right after we passed it, and it got a little bit of coverage. I think the problem was it was not controversial. It was and it did get mentioned in I don't know, a handful of articles, but it was not sort of featured. And I think that's what we're trying to now do with what Jen and others are doing, because I had the same question and the same frustration. And I think that, I think where we were as a board and as a system over the last year, the press was really interested in covering what was more controversial. And when we landed on this unanimous plan, they were not interested in giving it more than a few sentences. So I'm hoping we can package it up and be able to tell that story more broadly as we begin implementation, because the actual passage and initial rollout of the plan was met with, cool, like that's all we got. So yeah, I would just say that because I had the same frustration.
Yeah, and I get that the controversy sells and collaboration doesn't, but I again, this is Tori's wheelhouse about how to play stories which otherwise might not be attractive to the news media. And I would love to hear from her about what those plans are, because again, she's got expertise in this area, and maybe we could hear from her another time.
I'll put it on that agenda for the next meeting.
Thanks very much.
And I'd like to jump in too, Emily, if I could, to say that Tori did, and she, I think she shares our frustration that she put out a couple of different pieces and they just simply weren't interested. And I'll be blunt, not to be, I think the reason why is we were late. We were years and years in putting a strategic plan together, but organizations do this every year, every day. It's not necessarily big news outside of this. And so what has happened with what she's been able to put out and get some traction on, the chancellor has done a couple of interviews, one recently, a radio interview, I believe it was, that at least it's part of the conversation. It's part of the talking points. So it is being at least continued to be discussed, but it just didn't, even after the board meeting, even when she put out the talking points of the board meeting, I don't even think it was mentioned in the first article that came out after that. It just wasn't of interest.
We've also, I've also talked with Sam Warren, and I know Sam's got it on her list of things to potentially put in front of the education committee if they want it. Obviously, it's up to them. But in the off session, even when they do their meeting. So we're hoping to keep putting it in front of audiences deliberately.
Yeah, and so I didn't go into all the detail, but the framework that we're putting together has all the audiences, existing groups, everything from the boards to alums to donors to media to, it's all encompassing and inclusive. And again, it's just a draft collaboration. But I think the other piece that was mentioned is there's existing communications and boilerplates and templates, and how do we just keep that message kind of over and over? If there's good news, to Roger's point, kind of feeding that into messages going out, whether it's tied to something the campuses are doing, if there's a relevance for the strategic plan. And ultimately, we just had a mention today tied to adult degree completion programs at Farmington. Again, that aligns. So we're also working on kind of collaboratively pushing those and having them on a central feed so people can say, hey, look, there is news going on tied to the strategic plan. So all great points.
Thanks.
Let's go to some presidents here. We have Lee Softly, go ahead.
Good morning. So her name is Yulit. No, all right. We'll actually talk about the university. So
what is her name?
Pictures.
Oh my God, she's beautiful. Her name is Eulalia, which means well-spoken or beautiful words. And it's much better than my typical profanity, but she is perfect. However, let's talk about the strategic plan. So Maine Law gets back in town a little bit earlier, and we actually had our faculty development meeting this week. And with some great advice from the chancellor, one of the things that I did that I have not done before, I can get all of our faculty into one room, which is hugely helpful. And they all came to the meeting, and I had to give them the budget news. And then I went into those issues that will be guiding us as we make the hard choices that Barbara's talking about. And one of the things that worked really well was to make sure they understood that the strategic plan has to be looked at in the same context with the benefits of unified accreditation and what we are all working toward in UMS Transforms. So all of those pieces come together, and making hard choices is a lot easier when you look at the picture that says we have support and we have excitement about those pieces that are consistent with the strategic plan, that may be supported by UMS Transforms. And I was able to go into the meeting having had a great meeting with Joan and her team around research issues, which Maine Law has never had any real guidance on. And so the faculty are really rising to the occasion. They are not happy about the restrictions on all the wonderful travel they want to do, all of the additional bells and whistles they would like to have, but they're really very excited about putting it all together. And I just think if we think about all three of those guideposts as we start making the hard choices, that our faculty really stepped up. And what I hadn't thought about, and Jen, if you could just send us a link to the economic plan that the state is working on, because if we can weave that in with the other pieces, and make sure we're all rowing in the same direction, I think that would be really helpful. But the good news is that faculty they're worried about the budget. They're appropriately understand that things are tight, but they were coming up with some really great ideas that are supported by all of those particular components that we're working on. So stand by for great things from Maine Law.
Thank you, Lee. Ray, and then Joan.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add, I think, in regards, this is kind of a throwback to the previous comments a bit about why it didn't get more coverage than it did the release of the strategic plan. I think what you'll find, particularly as we go into this whole cycle of institutions reporting enrollments and budgets, you'll see the strategic plan attached to reports on individual campuses in particular, because that the media really focuses on University of Maine, Farmington, USM, right? And then that's particularly where the Kennebec Valley Journal, right, is going to focus on what's happening with UMA. How does that connect to the strategic plan? So I think that's where our work will be ahead of us to make sure that that messaging is getting out to the media in a way that is productive with the system strategic plan and the messaging about the individual campuses.
Thanks, Ray. Joan, and then Valerie.
Thank you. Well, I can't top the grandchild and I can't get my faculty all together in one room. And so I'm not sure what I can say, but I did want to go back to this question about publicity for the plan and bringing it into the public view. And I think people are making a lot of great points. It has to be hooked, I think, at this stage to something else that's happening. And then we bring it forward as a major guide and a major resource. I was thinking at first, one major thing will be when the campuses put forward their October 1 goals and actions, those very specific ideas, as those can be synthesized, I think do make potentially a story about where we are headed at the level of campuses. And then that can spin off into local reporting, which, as Ray said, is very important. The other thing is to pick up a bit on Jen's comments. In my VCRI report at the next board meeting, I'm focusing on the links between the state's economic development plan, all of the major funding that the system has, which is heavily workforce focused, and then the workforce development and kind of service to the state pieces of the strategic plan, how those can all fit together with a base of research and development. So I think we have to try to use occasions when it's being discussed or when something is happening with it and just commit to putting it in the foreground as much as we can.
Thank you very much. Valerie.
Yes, excuse me. I'd like to circle back a little bit and tee off what Barbara was talking about early on. And by way of context, you know, in looking at this strategic plan, I do see a tremendous amount of process objectives here. You know, by design, I understand there's a lot of, we'll set a goal for. Much of what I read seems to be things that the university does anyway, or should be doing anyway, right? They're not necessarily new things or strategic. They're things that, you know, we're going to invest in academic quality. Yes, we're going to, you know, there's just things that are hard to measure, I think. You know, I think it's well done, a lot of work, but I agree with the choices piece, but I also want to circle back on just outcomes, and that if there are, you know, 500 or 200 or 100 or 50, it's hard to figure out which ones of those are really the pieces that are going to advance the university in the way it needs to advance. So that's, and just another piece of this. I mean, I've served in the state government, which is another large system. I know some of you have as well. And I've looked at dozens of strategic plans going back decades, many of which would say things like, we're going to make sure that there's more collaboration between this agency and that agency. And then the results are this agency and that agency met 20 times this last year or met 5 times. It's like, oh, that's the progress? You met together and talked about stuff. All of this is good, right? But in the end, if the bottom line in terms of what those agencies needed to accomplish doesn't move, you know, more kids aren't protected from something, more X aren't developed. If those lines don't move, all this other activity doesn't really matter in the end. So I like to really focus on these outcomes, and this leads to my question, I guess, is that when we look at the board committees, are there or can there be, and there may not be an answer to this right now, and I know all of you have answers to this, but I don't need them necessarily today, but would there be a small number of KPIs or key performance indicators or whatever the right language is that those committees can stay focused on, so that each decision within that trustee committee structure can really be focused on things that advance, that we know are advancing the things in this plan that are most important to advance, right? Otherwise, it's really lofty language. Excuse me, it's very lofty language. But unless we can really tie it to the decision-making and activity, I think there may be some pollen in the air. My windows are open finally. because it's so nice out. That it will be really hard for us as trust, or be hard for me as a trustee to say, I see where this decision is tying back to that. And it doesn't need to be on every single thing that the university does. It really needs to focus on those things that are going to advance the university. So things like we met, or, or I see things like we're going to invest more in mental health. Is that $1 more? Is that doubling the investment in mental health? I mean, what is that? And I know that the intent is that we're going to put some meat on those bones, and that's what a lot of this implementation is about. But there's a lot in this plan. There's a tremendous amount in this plan. All of it, I don't think, is equal to advancing the university in this time of profound, dramatic, intensive change worldwide for all universities. Is it all good stuff? Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But I don't think it's all equal in terms of what we need to focus on in terms of trustees. So that outcomes is really what I look at. Where are we driving to? How do we know when we get there? So those outcome statements are important to me more so than the process statements. So I just want to toss that in. It's not exactly where Barbara was going with decisions, but it's a related strand that as a trustee is important to me.
It is related, and it came up, a version of it came up yesterday at FFT as well, in the way of some of the board work. And I think one of the things we've started to build into the work plan, but one of the reasons the work plan for the committee is not done is because of exactly what you raised today and what came up yesterday. Which is the connection to the jurisdictions of the various committees, right? This committee didn't exist until last year, and Trish made the decision to continue it to oversee the overall implementation. But you're absolutely right that there is a lot of work that will belong with the committees. We still are in that process of putting together more of the meat on the bones, right? And the deadlines that go with them. But I think that will be a part of this committee's work and the work of the team at the system to help us map out what belongs with those other committees, because it may end up that we need to do some joint meetings with other committees, or that we need to have presentations that we see that also go in front of committees. And I think that's going to be our challenge, but also our opportunity from a board perspective to really get that oversight correct. So it's a great point and well taken. I don't know if others want to jump in on that, but Barbara, go ahead.
I really enjoyed listening to Valerie's comments and the identification of priorities 1 and 2 and 3 for the board committees to take a look at. And one idea I had to get that in place, not at this meeting for sure, but is to have an executive committee meeting of the board, which involves all the committee chairs to discuss a proposal about how to allocate key KPIs to committees that would routinely appear on their agenda. And the notion that every agenda item might discuss the strategic plan connection is a good thing, but it really doesn't help the committee understand its primary focus to achieve the fiscal and academic and human resource responsibilities that are permeating the plan itself. So I suggest that as an option for
great. And Trish and I had a little bit of that conversation. I'm sorry she couldn't be here today, but you're exactly right. And that's where I think that next level conversation will also happen. It's a great idea. Thank you. I'm mindful of our time. We're still, I think, technically on the first item of this agenda. Are there any other comments related to the distribution socialization side before we move ahead? And we've already talked about this a little bit, but the updated implementation timeline. Let's go there, which I believe is Carolyn and Jeff.
Emily, thank you. So the two updates under this tab, and I want to be as clear as possible, so I explain them both lucidly. The first is just a reminder about the structure of implementation that we are developing. We have an executive steering committee staffed by several system staff members. Carolyn and I lead that group. In addition, we've recruited one president, Deb Hedin from Fort Kent, and one provost, Jarita Frierson from USM, to be part of that group. We've also spoken just once, but we'll do it again, with the presidents about having a professional staff member from one of the campuses beyond that group. And I'll be speaking with the Faculty Governance Council in September about a representative from that group to serve on the executive steering committee. In that way, we have system and campus voice, system and campus representation at different levels of the work. And through my contact with the board faculty representatives and the board and student representatives, will be communicating with students and faculty, in a variety of contexts to share updates with them and secure their participation and their feedback as well. That executive steering committee will essentially report out to the chancellor, the presidents, the other vice chancellors, and of course to the board strategic planning committee and any other committees of the board as that reporting process gets worked out. And we just had part of that conversation here. The plan is being really grouped for implementation in two ways. So Carolyn and I will be working with the presidents and the chancellor to identify co-chairs attached to each of the 5 commitments that provide the basic structure of the plan itself. Those co-chairs will be responsible for superintending work in under specific initiatives and goals for each of those 5 areas and reporting up to our executive steering group so that we can then distill, filter, and provide targeted and to Trustee Landry's point, outcomes-focused reports to the trustees, to the presidents, the chancellor, the other vice chancellors, really everyone who needs to hear those outcomes. We are carefully identifying the people we would like to have serve as those co-chairs. Primarily, they will come from the ranks of campus level leaders, because to the point that President Rice made and others have made as well. I mean, this is the chancellor made it too. A lot of these concerns are university level concerns. While it's a system plan and a system focus, we do want strong university level representation in the leadership group. The other way that we are grouping the plan ties to the title of tab 2. Carolyn and I have the important but totally unenviable task of assigning dates for outcomes to all of the remaining goals in the plan that don't already have a date assigned. We're working on that fast and slow at the same time, and very carefully, and in communication with the chancellor and the presidents for a number of reasons, and in the following way. So first of all, we're very mindful of not getting out ahead of the October 1 report out that Vice Chancellor Franny Money mentioned a few minutes ago. We are trying to work just in the wake of that report out so that we are ready to move to the next more defined stage of here's what's being done by who and when and under what timeline and with what outcomes immediately following that October 1 report out, so that the board sees progress on 2 levels in rapid succession and in a coordinated way. So all of this is done in a way that comes forward, is clear, manageable, and again, to Trustee Landry's point, has outcomes as the governing focus. So again, that first way of grouping the implementation oversight is by the 5 commitments. But in terms of assigning goals in the remaining areas, the tasks that Carolyn and I have, we're really looking at the plan as being grouped according to broadly the 4 portfolios of the 4 vice chancellors. So if you go through the plan, you can see there are a number of finance-based, infrastructure-based goals. There are then a number of research and innovation-oriented goals. There are many strategic initiatives And then in the final category, broadly, I would call it academic, student affairs, and accreditation related initiatives. And then enrollment really cuts across all of them. So Carolyn and I have grouped the plan in that way and are working to develop a provisional set of deadlines in each of those areas, take those out to Ryan and Joan and the chancellor, take them out to the presidents, and then develop a full-throated understanding of what's our exact sequence of goals and deadlines attached, both to have a clear map forward for who's doing what and when, but also to organize goals in a way so that smaller goals lead to bigger goals. Things that can be done more rapidly are done in parallel with things that will take longer to achieve. The whole thing being as coordinated as we can make it. As the chancellor said at the outset, this is a serious document. We're trying to treat it seriously in just that way. So to give you just one example, in my area, academic and student affairs and accreditation, I've pulled from the plan everything that is connected to that area. The provosts and I will use the month of September to go through that and provisionally assign goals for everything that connects that doesn't have a goal so far in that area. That will then come forward for Carolyn and I to discuss with Joan and Ryan and the chancellor, and then on to the presidents from there. And the same will happen in the other areas until Carolyn and I have done our job and assigned a workable, realistic, but also ambitious timeline for each area of the plan that's currently unassigned in terms of due date, and then coordinated that with all of the other areas of the plan that already have a date attached. So it is complex, but it is organized. We have a plan for doing it. We're moving that plan forward. We've had, as the chancellor noted, fantastic discussions with the presidents every week, and we will move that forward through the next 5 weeks until we come just up behind the work of the presidents in reporting out on October 1st. And then that next phase follows right on the heels of that. Carolyn, did I say that all in a coherent way?
Perfect. It was a great update. Yep.
And then our committee meeting comes shortly after that in October 19th. So there'll be plenty of time for us to get the materials and review them ahead of time. So
Emily, there will be no dearth of materials for the
I know
October
this is
19th.
like the last meeting where it's just an update. So from now on, it'll be dense, but interesting and fun and exciting and important. Other updates on this category or questions for Jeff or Carolyn related to timeline before we go to university progress updates? Great, thank you. Carolyn, I think you're taking the
Yes.
lead on this one.
I am, yes.
And I want to say, we normally would love to hear from all the presidents. We did not ask them to be on this agenda because we are on the verge of all the arrivals. And I know that because the traffic is picked up in front of my house. And so we will look forward to hearing from the presidents all of the presidents, when we have the reports post the deadline. And so just from an expectation setting for today, that's why we did that. So Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And so my update is really brief, just knowing that the presidents, some were going to be able to join us today and some not. I reached out when we met with them last week. As both Jeff and the chancellor mentioned, we have identified a weekly meeting with the presidents and the vice chancellors where we just talk about these issues, their goal setting, the implementation timeline, all of the different activities that are coming as it relates to the strategic plan. And the sessions have been really helpful, first to hear about what's happening on their campus, some of the things that they are finding they're able to move through more easily, but then also those that have been maybe causing them pause, or they consider that it could be a challenge as they move forward to talk about or talk with people about. So it's been a really helpful time. At the last meeting, knowing that I was going to offer a quick update, I just at the very end of the meeting quickly said, okay, sort of raise of hands or quick shout out as a percentage. How are you feeling? How are you making your way towards your goal of having the October list that we're looking at? And it turned into an incredibly unexpected and robust conversation, which is good because it's kind of where you can get really into it and start to work on the things that you need to. They were just they've been moving along doing the work, but had some questions, wanted a little bit more detail from us about some of the plan, a little bit about structure and how you as a board might want to see some of these, some of the information they're presenting. So all really good questions. And you can tell that they're doing the work and trying to get the information together from the campus level. So that was a great experience to have. And the only other thing I would add to that, as part of the discussion, I think we all have heard from the presidents over the last few months that one of the concerns is the fact that there are going to be a lot of things that have to happen, and we haven't really identified a lot of resources to be able to assist in this work. So one of the things that we wanted to do initially is look at some of the funding that we have. So with Jeff and the chancellor and others, Ryan, we have identified adult degree completion funds that can be sort of used in a way that will help with strategic plan implementation efforts. President Freeney Monday looked at the UMS Transforms, the funds that came from the Harold Alfond Foundation, because again, a lot of that work, it really lines up well with what it is that we would like to do and hope to do with the goals of this plan. So she has been taking the time to overlay their list of goals and priorities and timelines to what we're doing. So that's work that's been happening in the last month, and that we're happy to share with presidents and you all at the next meeting so that we can identify areas where we have resources and work that we can make a priority and move into pretty quickly. So I feel comfortable that the presidents are going to be well on track for that October 1 deadline. And as Emily and others have said, they will report out themselves at the next meeting. But I know there are, four of them on the call with us right now. So if anybody wants to speak up on that, happy to turn the floor over.
Joan, you had your hand raised, but then you're good.
I'll just amplify a little bit about what Carolyn said. As you know, one of the major components of the Transforms project is student success and retention. Mm-hmm. And that grant requires certain kinds of outcomes and outputs, as well as milestones. So more process steps. And we shared that information with all of the presidents so that they can look at that as they work to put together their campus goals. Think about how that fits. There are also sub goals within the engineering and computing pieces, as well as the main center, that are available to people as potential ways to align what the strategic plan calls for with activity that's already underway and that has some dollars attached to it.
Thank you. Any questions oh yes, Ray, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add too, like just as an example, I know this is happening at the other campuses, but we have had cabinet level retreats about the revision of our kind of operational plan and matching, ensuring the match with appropriate system plan, strategic planning goals, and providing a crosswalk for those areas as we revise the plan. Our goal is to have, so we've been working that at the cabinet level. That will go before the entire campus in late September. And then our goal is to have that presented, for instance, to ASA and the board approval for the March meeting. So you would actually see our revised strategic plan matching the current system strategic plan with a crosswalk of all those things linked up. Just at the welcome back yesterday, for instance, we talked about both our strategic plan values. We did a whole values exercise for our campus, kind of rebooting that, and about the system strategic plan. So I know that is happening even on the campuses as these welcome back and workshops are happening across the system.
Thank you for sharing that. Thanks, Ray. Any other thoughts or questions on this piece? If not, we'll move ahead. At the last meeting, you got the draft, initial draft plan for the committee. For the October meeting, what we have on deck, and I think actually the agenda says September. Yeah, no, we want to talk about the September board meeting. Yeah. That's sorry, not the October committee meeting. So the September board meeting, we had talked about, and Trisha's not here, so we'll just assume she's in agreement, and we'll double check with her. But we had talked about making the strategic plan a standing part of every board meeting, right? That as a report out, and it, I believe, would fall under Carolyn's update on the meeting. In the past several meetings, the update has been about where we were in the writing process and the development process. But what I'd love to do is just maybe spend 10 minutes, if we could throw out to support Carolyn, and as she offers that update, what we want her to be reporting out on. Again, when the meeting happens in a few weeks, we will not have hit any of the deadlines yet. So I think, like this meeting, this is an update meeting. Though I will say up front, I think the communications plan is certainly something that we're going to want to focus on at the board meeting in September. And that rollout, and maybe even having, wherever it's going to be in process, having Jen and maybe Tori also talk about that. But other things that an update on the structure on the executive committee that Jeff mentioned, I think is certainly to be part of that conversation. But I'd love to hear from others before I just rattle off a list of things you want to make sure are included in the board reporting.
And I think just to add to that, more specifically, as Emily said, for the upcoming in September, because I think once we get past
for the next board, the September board meeting, in a few weeks. Yeah.
Because once we get past October, we'll have certainly very specific things we'll be reporting out on, but just didn't know what you would like to hear. Yes, Trustee Alexander.
Yeah, Barbara, go ahead. Yeah.
I agree, Chair Kane, with your preliminary list. And I understand that it's September and we really can't foresee some results that we're going to get later on. But I do think it would be good to have some interactive type of discussion among the board about some of the activities going on. Valerie and I and others have spoken out about some themes and the desire, which is shared, I think, for the board to understand how the entire board will be involved in hearing about and having an appropriate level of input from time to time on reviewing what's happening and who's in charge of what, and foreshadowing the fact that a discussion needs to be had with regard to the role of the committees in the oversight process, the strategic plan committee, of course, and how the board will, as a whole, will be hearing about this work. So all I'm saying is try to figure out a way to elicit a conversation with the board in terms of your presentation is my only recommendation at this point. Thank you.
Great, Barbara. And I'm doing a follow-up call with Trish after this meeting, either later today or tomorrow, and I'll make sure she and I we are aligned on that as being a priority for the meeting. Valerie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, this may be it's really a question for anyone or a suggestion for future meetings, and it goes to Jeff, to your comments around engaging faculty in this process, and Lee talked about that as well. When we get together, I'd really like to hear over time what the faculty are thinking, good or bad, right? We really need to hear the unfiltered. And I also think the Board of Visitors can be more instrumental than the Board of Visitors roles at these campuses will be what we want it to be. If we have them be just cheerleaders and they're just on the side, that's who we're going to attract on those groups. We've seen Board of Visitors that had lots of business leaders and lots of sort of engagement and high power and fundraising capacity and interest and professional capacity. And we've seen boards that have not had that, right? And part of it has to do with what do we give them to do? What do we engage them around? They can play a hugely important role in relationship building, in fundraising, in promoting, but that only happens if we give them important assignments. So I would say engage them in ways that are more than just here's an update and thanks a lot and see you later, right? So just underscoring the board piece. But also I'm interested to know, we're all everywhere, right? People are being asked to do more with less, right? In so many organizations. This university is probably no different than that. I'm overwhelmed sometimes by the detail in the strategic plan, all the things that are going to happen, right? This is big. This is a lot in here. And there's a lot of other stuff that isn't in here that everybody does every day, trying to get their work done, right? So I'm interested to hear what the reaction is to all of that. You got to keep your budget flat. You're not going to get any other help. Not going to this and that, but we want you to do all these other cool things. How do people react to that? What are they saying on the ground to this plan and to these directives? It may all be good. We understand it. We're going forward, but I really want to hear what those reactions are. It's important for us to know, we all have our feelers on the ground in certain places, but not statewide. I certainly don't. So I'd really like to hear when the presidents are on or others, here's what actually the faculty are saying. And we need to know that, and not just hear the top line around whatever final agreement was made, because that is always top down, right? I mean, that's just the way it has to be. So I just ask that, Jeff, as you're engaging faculty, to give us the unvarnished reality on the campuses that helps us, right? Helps us to understand how to move all of this forward. So those are
we can absolutely do that, Valerie. And as former faculty myself, I can tell you that unvarnished is the only flavor it comes in. So you won't have any trouble getting clear and direct feedback on whatever is viewed as a positive or whatever is viewed as challenging.
I know it's out there. I don't know if we always get it, when it comes up through these meetings. I hear it on the ground more than I hear it here. And that's why I like to hear it here as well. So thank you.
And I think in the last year, there's been a lot of even greater open communication with the faculty reps to the board. We do have a faculty member on this committee who is not able to be with us today, but that is a part of it. And we can make sure we have that as the part of the conversation. I think same with the student reps to the board, as well as on top of the faculty. We can also do more to engage in that conversation with them to get the unvarnished perspective from all levels, for sure. And I think the other piece was, and I had given this feedback to Jeff, I think you mentioned this, about adding someone from the professional staff to the executive committee as well, for that perspective at the table. Thank you.
Great.
Other
Thank
thoughts
you.
on for the next meeting? Amazing. Great. That is the conclusion of our meeting for today. I would just ask for committee members that draft work plan is still diligent. And, if you have feedback on that, I think the way I envision this going, because this is both a planned out process, but also there will be unexpected things along the way, that we will sort of do this kind of check-in as we go about what comes next. The next meeting is pretty clear because we have so many deadlines that come before it, but just before it. But if you could all just take a look, and please send it to me, send it to Kayla, who will send it to me, either one. If you have thoughts about other things you want to see on future committee meeting agendas, because again, where we are in the process, we're not quite at the bulk of the work yet, but we're heading into it fast and furiously. And I think we'll have a lot more to talk about in the coming meetings. So I will also just do a check to see if there's any other comments from anybody on the committee today, or members who are in attendance. Well, with that, we can end the meeting early today. I'll say thank you. I hope you all enjoy this beautiful day. Have a wonderful rest of your summer. I'm personally on day 31 of a 40-day streak of company. So I can't wait for Labor Day to come and go. And I'm going to go do some laundry now. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And we'll talk to you very soon.